Hi, welcome back to Psychology Bites. This is episode 7 for us.
Wow.
Unfortunately, we did skip last week because it was Easter, and we were busy with our families, so we didn't get time to film anything last week. But we're back again this week, and again, I am the host, Heather. I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. I minored in psychology, and I do a lot of the research for the show to come up with questions and make sure everything runs smoothly. And then, of course, we have our field expert, Dr. Cindy Edens. She's a licensed counselor, sorry. And
LPC.
yeah. And she's also my mother-in-law. And for anyone who's interested, she does counsel in the state of Georgia. And she is accepting clients only at the Garden of Eden counseling location. And it is online appointments only. And that information is on our page. But today we are going to talk about PTSD.
Mention how we got our name.
Oh yeah. So we do get a few questions about how we came up with the name Garden of Eden. So as I've kind of mentioned, our last name is Edens, and it's spelled Edins. But every time we go somewhere, someone always refers to us as Edens or just Eden. They leave off the S altogether. And so we thought it was a fun play on words to say that we're the Garden of Eden, because we also live on a farm and we garden and have a lot of plants and animals. So we thought it was like a fun little play on words to say that we're the Garden of Eden, because everybody gets our names wrong. But anyway, so we're going to talk about PTSD, which of course is post-traumatic stress disorder. And so I kind of did this one the same way that I did the ADHD episode. I just looked up the most common questions about it, so that we can go over this. And of course, if you guys have any questions at the end, let us know, comment, or send us an email. So first question, what is PTSD?
So PTSD is a trauma-based diagnosis for post-traumatic stress disorder. And so what basically happens, and a lot of people feel like this is something related to like military, or if somebody got raped. And certainly, yes, they can qualify as, things happening. And however, it's not the only way you can have trauma. Trauma can look different for different people. It depends on how you are affected. So you might experience something, say a bank robbery, and 10 people are in the bank when the bank's getting robbed. And maybe 5 of them end up with PTSD out of it, and maybe 5 don't. Why do 5 don't?
We're going to get into that.
Okay.
not to cut you off, but we're going to answer that question.
Okay.
Who experiences PTSD?
There's also a complex PTSD, but it's not really kind of diagnosable yet. We're working on it. But that's like really long term when it becomes like a real issue. Mm-hmm. PTSD isn't necessarily for life.
We're going to get into that too.
PTSD is. So who gets it?
Yes. Commonly.
So military personnel that have been in really horrific situations. Anybody that's been sexually molested or sexually abused or raped. Yes, there's a difference in all those words. It can also be somebody that experienced trauma at the hands of their own family growing up. Family abuse, somebody having to live with an alcoholic and be abused. It ranges so a lot. There's the learned helplessness versus the hardy personality.
And it can come on at any age, right?
Oh, yeah. Oftentimes, little kids that experience really, really bad trauma, sometimes they will go mute, self-mutism, in which they really just can't talk. And it's like severe trauma.
Yeah.
Induced, usually. So
I know a lot of times people assume that PTSD is only associated with veterans or people that have served time in the military. But as we've said, that's not always true. It can come from several different types of trauma. But what would you say are probably the most common symptoms that you see displayed?
Nightmares. People get nightmares. People get triggered from different things in their own environment. Could be the sound of a song, a certain song. Could be somebody saying something. Could be somebody touching them without permission. Could be a bunch of different things. But you will see nightmares, inability to regulate emotions really well, because of the emotional responses from the stress, uh, all kinds of things.
Yeah. Do all PTSD victims have the same symptoms?
No, absolutely not. And that's one of the reasons why it gets so confusing to people.
So it's different for every person.
Yeah, I've had clients who said they never had any trauma. They don't have PTSD. And then we start talking about their background. I'm like, oh my God. Like, okay, really? You don't think you have trauma? This was traumatic. Well, I've never been in the military and never got raped, nothing like that. Well, okay, but this kind of deal. Yeah.
Okay. How common is PTSD? Like, do you know off the top of your head some statistics?
No, but so I don't know why I know this. Well, I guess I do. But in Brazil, there is a woman raped every minute of every day. That's pretty bad. Like, that's really bad.
Yeah.
And like, there's a lot of rape that goes on, that people don't really realize. It's really, really too much. And the amazing thing about that sexual abuse or rape is it's been ongoing for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But in general, like, you would say you see it pretty commonly, PTSD?
Yes. I'd say on average, 90% of my client base has some kind of PTSD, some kind of trauma.
Okay.
And then real bad trauma can cause schizophrenia or psychosis.
We're going to do an episode on that later. How is it detected? Like, when does someone get diagnosed?
When it starts interfering with their life. So one of the diagnostic criteria is actually that it has to interfere with their life. So say they're trying to go to work every day, but they're late every single day because when they are driving, they hear a horn honk, they go into a trauma response. Mm-hmm. And so then they have like an anxiety attack, and then they have to pull over, and so that always makes them late. Just a dumb example, but there can be like lots of different things like that.
Yeah. Okay. Does PTSD get better or worse over time?
Well, the ideal is that it should get better over time. And somebody with PTSD can absolutely conquer their trauma and their trauma response. And that's, what we do in counseling. We process it. For the record, the reason that it worked, am I allowed to answer that question?
Yeah, go
ahead. For the record, the way that we process it in counseling is they're talking about it. So because of the way the memory works, so what the memory does is when it has this traumatic incident, it's high emotion, and it processes that at night through the hippocampus and the amygdala into long-term memory. But it does it like a photograph, and it does it with all those emotions. And so whenever you think about that memory, or whenever that memory tries to pop up or something reminds you of that memory, you get that high emotional response. So through counseling, we pull it back out of the long-term memory, and we talk about it, and we process it in a calm, cool atmosphere. And then you process it into your memory that night when you sleep, because that's why everybody fights about memories, siblings, because we can change our memories. And so the memory itself may not change as far as the details, but what will change is that emotion, so that when they have something that reminds them of it or whatever, they may think of it, but it's not going to be that high emotional response anymore.
Yeah. Okay, can PTSD be cured?
I guess I just answered
Sort of.
that. Yeah, like yes, it can.
Like you can get past it.
You can. It doesn't mean your trauma is ever going to go away. It's always going to be there, but you can get past it where you can live a perfectly great life.
Okay. Here's what we were talking about earlier, where I cut you off. Why do some people get PTSD after a traumatic event and others don't? Like if they experience the same event.
So have I told the research dog study yet?
I don't know.
All right. I hate this study, first of all, but I like to tell everybody this story because whoever did this research study, these dogs deserve to be told. Their story should be told. Anyway, so a research study was done on dogs. They were trying to figure out why women go from one relationship to another, one abusive relationship to another abusive relationship. And so what they did was they put dogs in wire cages and they ran electricity through them, through the wires. I know, that's really, really bad. I would have never done it, trust me. But since they had to suffer, we should all know what they suffered for, I feel like. And so most of the dogs, majority of the dogs, laid down eventually and just learned to take it. Whereas there were a few, handful, not many, that continued to fight, would bite at the bars and whatever, trying to get away to the point of, in a couple cases, death. And so what did they learn from that? They learned learned helplessness versus hardy personality. Why are some people born with hardy personality and some people learned helplessness? I think that's still pretty much a mystery, but some people are. Some people are very hardy and got through a lot of stuff and came out of it doing okay, where other people were like, I can't get out of it. I can't get out of bed. I can't do this. And it's just a matter of learned helplessness versus hardy personality. So some people just, especially I guess in abusive situations, they begin to think that that's the lot in life. This is just what we have to put up with. Mm-hmm. Especially when you're raised that way, like by an abusive parent that's whatever they're abusive for whatever reason.
Like different people just process it different ways.
Yeah.
Like, which is why siblings who grew up in the same home environment one may get it, one may not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or they have different levels of PTSD or different, levels of responses.
Yeah. Okay. What's the difference between a normal reaction to a traumatic event and PTSD?
I don't know. I kind of think that PTSD is a normal reaction to a stress event. If the stress event is really, really high, of course we're going to be traumatized. I feel like that's normal.
I feel like this kind of goes back to everyone processes it differently.
Yeah.
Everyone has their own set of normal reactions.
Like, for example, the bank robbery example I gave a few minutes ago. So 5 people came out with PTSD in that, my little example, and 5 people came out without PTSD. Why did those 5 people come without PTSD? They looked at the situation differently. They processed it differently. And for the record, if we look at something as challenging rather than frightening, or something bad that we have to go through, and we can turn it around in our heads as a challenge, then we're far less likely to come out with PTSD, no matter how bad the situation.
Okay. Can children experience PTSD?
Children experience PTSD all the time.
All right. How can someone, like a relative, help someone with PTSD at home? Like maybe, the husband has PTSD and the wife wants to know what they can do to help, or vice versa.
So, like, one thing that really works well is like a safe word. So you define the safe word in advance. For example, every time the wife starts getting agitated and yelling, the husband can come in with a safe word like pumpernickel. Pumpernickel is always my response because it's like, a good bread. Nobody says it, and it's a fun word, and it makes you smile. And so, say, like she grew up in a household where mom threw things and yelled and screamed, and the slightest little thing, and mom was rawr. And so now, of course, she never got counseling and whatever. So now she does the same thing as mom, and she goes rawr and throws things and stuff. And so the husband could like make her a counseling appointment, and then he could also, I mean, I'm just saying, and then he could also use like a safe word like pumpernickel. And so it's defined when she's not upset and she wants to work on this behavior. So he says pumpernickel as he sees her starting to escalate. And then she has the opportunity to actually think about her behavior and think about what she's doing and calm herself down.
Yeah. Like, I think the point is having a safe word should enact a set of rules almost.
It's you always got to define it.
Yeah, like you define, okay, when he says pumpernickel, she has the responsibility to take 20 minutes away from the family to get herself together and calm down and get out of the situation. And then they can come back together at the end of the 20 minutes and talk about it and talk about what triggered her so that they can move forward.
Yep.
Like, it should be defined what the word is supposed to mean.
Yeah, because it's different in every situation. Yeah. Everybody's safe word, and you can have multiple safe words that mean different things. So.
Yeah. Okay. What are the best treatment options for PTSD, and how is it handled in therapy?
Psychotherapy, and I think I kind of answered by processing. You got to talk about it. Sorry, but you do. It gets easier though. Like when you start talking about it, you're talking about it to a clinician who, wasn't there, didn't have anything to do with it, but can empathize and understand and help you to sort through your memories and what happened and what you don't remember, because that comes with it. A lot of people, kids especially, you said about kids, a lot of people that have had trauma when they were young have very, very shoddy memories. Like they just can't remember stuff. It happens. So,
like they've just blocked it out.
Mm-hmm. But, you can also use the memory and how the memory works to not block it out, but process them and get through them so that they're not hindering your life anymore. Mm-hmm. And you can live the life you want to live.
Yeah.
That's what the goal is. Psychotherapy.
Okay.
Oftentimes, like if somebody has really bad anxiety or really bad depression due to the PTSD, which always comes with it, we should talk about anxiety versus depression sometime. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so oftentimes that'll augment so badly that they can't process it. So what a lot of people do will go and get on some kind of medication from a psychiatrist. And while they're on the medicine and helping them with stabilizing their emotions, they can process it and then eventually get off the meds.
Yeah. All right. So that kind of is like the most common questions that I could find. But do you have anything else that you'd want to add about it?
Trauma looks differently for everybody, and it's just a matter of actually taking care of it. Doing something about it so that you don't have to live like that. And, there's a lot of people that flat out refuse to help themselves. But it's not only helping yourself, it's helping your family. It's helping your friends and your coworkers and your loved ones so that they don't have to deal with your triggers, your responses. It's not anybody else's responsibility to not trigger you. I hear that a lot. Oh, my spouse or my partner or my whoever triggers me, and he knows or she knows that that's a trigger for me. Why do they keep on doing it? We can't control that. Nobody can control what anybody else does. You think maybe you can, and people love control, but it just really isn't reliable, feasible, whatever. The only thing we really have total control of is our behaviors, how we respond to a different situation. And so nobody can sit there and say that, well, you can, but it wouldn't be accurate, that somebody or so-and-so shouldn't trigger me. It's about us handling our triggers. It's not anybody else's responsibility. Yeah. And that doesn't take away from the situation that made somebody have trauma, but it does, we do have to take responsibility if we want to get through it so that we're not affecting our friends and family. I've seen where it really affects family and friends, and it can tear families apart. A lot of times you end up, people avoid trauma by self-medicating. Alcohol, drugs, that's really super common. We even call it self-medicating. It's so common.
Yeah.
But yeah. Oh, and there's ketamine. People are doing, like, there's doctors, like there's one in Athens, there's a clinic in Athens that does it. And so ketamine is like this major tranquilizer they use for horses. But they are using it, and what they do is it like totally brings the client to a really, really peaceful place where there's no high emotions, and then they process their trauma with a clinician. And so what it does is it allows them to be able to process. It's a very expensive treatment from what I understand. But I have had people who experience pretty good success with it, to be honest.
Yeah.
There's all different kinds of treatments. There's more treatments in like the Philippines where they do mushrooms to kind of do stuff. There are different treatments other than the standard psychotherapy and medication.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that pretty much brings us to the end of the episode. If you guys have any more questions or things that we didn't talk about that you want to hear about, again, you can put it in the comments or send us an email. But I think that pretty much covers today's episode. Next week, we're going to be talking about tips for managing stress, which I know pretty much everybody can benefit from. But I think that does it for today. So have a great week, everyone, and thanks for joining us for episode 7 of Psychology Bites.